Hey everyone, Clio here and welcome to my March TBR. So I have been dying for March for a while, and it's not to say that I didn't have great books on my February TBR. Actually, two out of these books are continuations of books that I actually read in February. No, two. I'm confusing myself so much. Two of these are actually continuations of books that I read in February, but I've been really dying for the books that are on this TBR. So without further ado, let's just dive into it. If you've been following my channel, you know that in 2021 I'm just putting 5 books on there. That doesn't mean that I won't necessarily read more than those 5, but I don't want to put any sort of pressure on myself to read as much as possible. And so one way in which I'm doing that is just saying, okay, I'm committing to 5 at the beginning of the month. If I just read those 5, then that's just fine as well. But so, one of my main goals for 2021 is reading more fantasy, and so 3 of the 5 books on this TBR are actually fantasy, so let me dive into those ones first. So first up, the only not physical copy that I have with me is The Name of All Things by Jenn Lyons, which is a buddy read that I'm doing with Sarah from Voyage Through Worlds. So this is the second book in a epic fantasy series called A Chorus of Dragons. In it we are following our protagonist Kieran, who is basically a lost heir, which is kind of a stereotypical trope within the fantasy genre, but it is definitely not a stereotypical book at all. So first of all, that whole lost heir aspect to it is kind of dodgy. You're kind of unsure about, what his exact parentage is, and that is definitely something that we'll be exploring throughout the entire book, possibly throughout the entire series, who knows. And he also is very much it's not this case where it's a lost heir trying to reclaim their position and then everything is fine and that's kind of the end goal of their story. No, it's very much the beginning of his story. Finding out who he really is very much sets things in motion and very much leads him to be a sort of pawn in it for cats. And very much leads him to be sort of pawn in these sort of strategic political manipulations and all of these things. It's very much a complex world and a complicated read. A lot of the time you feel confused and you're unsure about what's taking place, or you're unsure about really fully understanding everything in it, but I absolutely loved it. And it's quite a diverse read as well, and it dives into certain topics that I haven't really seen fantasy address before. So very eager to dive into the second book within this series. I was going to say trilogy. It's a series. It's a 5-part series. The 4th book is coming out in May, and so Sarah and I are reading every book within this series so far for the publication of the 4th one, for which I just got approved for the NetGalley arc, so yay! So that's perfect news, first of all, because I'm dying to read it, of course, but also because that means I don't have to spend a credit on it yet. So I know my whole book buying credit system has been giving me great grief this year, but that's also why it's there, to make me not just impulse buy everything. And so this way I have access to all for the first 3 books via script, and I have the NetGalley arc for the 4th one. And then if I like them, I might buy them at a later date, but that way I won't have to use a credit for it anymore because I will have already read it. But enough about A Chorus of Dragons. Second continuation book that I'm reading is The Rogue by Trudy Canavan. So this is the second book in the Traitor Spy trilogy. The Traitor Spy trilogy is a continuation series of the Black Magician trilogy, and I definitely do think you need to read the Black Magician trilogy before going into this, because it does build a lot off of that world building that was already there. We don't really get a lot of the previous world that has been explored in Black Magician. Not a lot of that is being explored here. We do get a lot about the sort of new world that we're looking at. We do get some information about there's a sort of neighboring kingdom that they explore, and we do get some information about that, but we don't really get much about this original setting of the Black Magician trilogy. Now, the Black Magician trilogy was all about Sonia, who was kind of living in the slums, and in the annual purge of the magicians, she finds out that she actually has magical powers, whereas it's supposed to be the case that only people of the nobility have magical powers. I won't go into more when it comes to this trilogy, but I absolutely absolutely love that trilogy. It has a lot of elements that we like to see in fantasy. It has a kick-ass female protagonist. It has sort of like an epic rivalry. It has a boarding school setting at some point. It has some, you know, like escape and evade. It has a new culture to explore. It has rivalry between kingdoms. It has all of those things. It has dark magic, all of those things. So I really enjoyed that. I will say that the first book in the continuation series so far has been a little bit underwhelming for me, in the sense that I didn't feel like it built to a big like sort of crescendo moment at the end of that first book, but I was definitely intrigued about the new character that we get. So I will say that I'm not entirely... It's not like I'm bored when we're looking at the continuation of the story of the characters that we had from the Black Magician trilogy. It's just that I'm less intrigued. I'm more intrigued with the storyline of the new character who is setting off to a new kingdom to kind of be the apprentice to, or the assistant to the ambassador there, and a whole adventure starts to ensue there. And that storyline really intrigues me, and is what is mainly... And so that is a storyline that's actually mainly driving me through this book at this point in time, hoping for this second one to kind of stir things up a little bit. In any case, the way that the first one left off with that character that I enjoy most does open up the second book for a lot of interesting world exploration, so I'm definitely going to be enjoying it. I just hope that it kind of gets to a higher level again, the way that I had with the Black Magician trilogy originally. The final fantasy that is on there is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. So this is part of my Cosmere project for 2021. So I'm rereading and reading for the first time a lot of the Cosmere. And so Mistborn is up. So for the next half year or so, I am diving into the world of Mistborn. So I'm rereading the Mistborn era one, and then I'm going to be reading for the first time Mistborn Secret History and Mistborn Era 2. I can't wait, but I was also super excited to get to reread Mistborn Era 1. It's been 7 years since I reread this. I first read this about 11 years ago, I think. It's been my favorite fantasy since then. At this point in time, it's competing with Stormlight Archive, I guess, but I don't think you can really compare the two. I feel like they're so different from one another that they coexist in peace and harmony. But so, The Final Empire, I absolutely love this book, and this one I'm pretty confident I can say that I have a good memory of it, but when it comes to Well of Ascension, the Hero of Ages, there's a lot that I don't remember. I know some of the elements that are in there, but when I see people say like, I just finished The Hero of Ages, this book has broken me, I'm like, how? What happens there? What did I forget? So potentially when I'm rereading those books, it's going to be like my reread of Oathbringer, where I'm like, how did I forget that? How can you forget that? But so, The Final Empire is the first book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. It is a great way to start with Brandon Sanderson, for example. It's sometimes, some people find it daunting because it's a trilogy, so in that case I would say start with Warbreaker probably. But I started with The Final Empire and I absolutely loved it. So in this one we are following a sort of ragtag crew of criminals to some extent who are planning to overthrow the Empire because the Empire is not treating its citizens very properly. This is a very cool heist-centered storyline in which the stakes are incredibly high, in which we have a super interesting magic system in which metals can be consumed in order to access powers. And so based on which metal you can access a different power, and some people can access one, some people can access none, and some people can access them all, and they are what is referred to as Mistborn. And so our main protagonist in this one is Vin, who is basically a sort of street urchin who has learned not to trust anybody because everybody in her life has disappointed her up until this point, and so she will need to be learning to trust these new people in her surroundings a little bit more as she finds out that she's a Mistborn, and so she is a crucial element to their plans. So those are all the fantasies that I put on this TBR, but I'm not straying far with the next one because this is still speculative, so I have a sci-fi on here, and that is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I know nothing about this book. I knew something about this book when I first picked it up, over a year ago already. I picked it up somewhere in 2019, I'm going to assume, before I created sort of my tracking spreadsheet that tracks when I purchase a book, when I read a book. But so I first heard about this on the channel of Emily, of Books with Emily, and I was so excited about reading it based off of her talking about it, so I immediately bought it. I bought it for a friend as well. I don't think she's read it yet neither, but I definitely was so eager to read it. There's been multiple times in which I've looked at my bookshelves and I've been like, I want to pick you up, I want to read you, but it's just not felt like the moment, or it's just been the case that, you know, I had so many other things that I wanted to prioritize over this one. But it's happening now. I'm reading this one and I'm so excited. As I said, I don't really know anything anymore, and I'm actually going to keep it like that. But I think it has to do with intelligence and some sort of an experimentation with mice. I think it's something like somebody who isn't very smart gets injected or somehow ends up with super intelligence or something like that, but I could be completely wrong about that. But so yeah, I'm very much eager to dive into this one. Every single time that I've seen somebody talk about it in the meantime, I've been like, yes, I know, I want to pick it up, and it's happening. This book is on my 12 books for 2021 list as well, so it's great that I'm tackling that list as well with this read. Another one of that same list, another book for the 12 books for 2021, is The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Juno Diaz. This is another book that I gave to a friend, that same friend actually, and she immediately read this one and she loved it. And so now I'm like, since then I've been like, yeah, I need to pick it up, because she was super excited about that. She really loved that a whole lot. And so it's been more than a year once again, and I haven't picked it up yet, so I definitely do want to make sure that I'm picking this up. Also because, yes, I'm going to be shaming myself here. This is the first book that I'm going to be reading this year that is not by a white author. That definitely needs to change. We are already in March and I have yet to read a book written by somebody who is not white. I mean, I'm trying to read more diversely, and that's definitely not happened so far this year, clearly, so need to change that. The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde is a coming-of-age story about a young boy in the Caribbean, I think, or is it in the... No, so it's from a Dominican family, but they are living in the US. Don't know more about this. I know that my friend was saying that it's super fast-paced, that she was extremely engrossed within this story, and that I don't even remember whether it's like heartbreaking or really just more like heartwarming, but I trust her judgment, even though sometimes we do have a difference of opinion. But it's mainly the case that I love something and she doesn't, because I don't know, I have some strange reading taste apparently, because within my friend group, everything that I love people hate. What they love I like usually, but the other way around doesn't work. But so I'm definitely eager to dive into this one within the month of March. So that's it. Those are my 5 books that I'm prioritizing for the month of March. I think I got a nice balance there. You know, I have 2 massive fantasies, I have 2 like regular 300-page length novels, and then I have 1 in between there that's close to the 500 mark. So I've got a nice balance there to kind of like even out the numbers throughout this month. In the month of March, it is also going to be Becca's Bookoplathon, and so for that I don't know what I'm reading yet, because that's going to be quite last minute based off of the fact that most of the prompts, except for the first one, which is a dark cover or a fantasy, I think it was. I still need to look it up again. Most of the prompts you're only given that weekend itself, so no preparation possible for that, except for the fact that I should be reading one of the 3 fantasies in order to be able to comply with that goal at that point in time. But so yeah, that's it for my March TBR. Let me know if you've read any of those books and what your thoughts were on them. I'm definitely very excited about this TBR, and you know, I kind of have to be like, you know, I still have 2 days in the month of February at this point in time when I'm filming this. You still need to finish 2 books at least. Don't get too excited about these yet. Stay with the ones that you're currently reading, but it's gonna be there soon enough, and I cannot wait to dive into these books. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for a future one. Bye!